So that happened. I expected it, to be honest. I saw the wear and tear. I actually checked about 10 shots earlier to see how bad it was, but obviously let this slide for months. The other end was going to snap sooner or later anyway. In terms of any injuries, well, you can't really see anything. Got a bit of a small whip on the string. You can't really see it, so it doesn't really count. If this was a heavier bow, perhaps it might cause a lot more damage, but it's a light bow, so nothing wrong there. In terms of where the arrow landed, one of the cool things about these string snaps is that it doesn't affect the shot that whole much. So 1, 2, 3, and then number 4, the string break, that's the landing. So a lot of people are concerned about the state of their string. They might see a bit of wear and tear, and they'll post a photo and ask, is the string safe to use? And there's always a conservative element to safety for things like arrows and bows and strings. Generally speaking though, the more common string wear and tear is fairly mundane. Things like serving coming off happens frequently, can be easily fixed by hand. It does not compromise the integrity of the string. But there are some things which you do have to watch out for. And what we saw then is exactly that. So we'll go through what damage the string can take and what should be avoided at all costs. So the elements which are most prone to wear and tear are the serving areas. In this case, the black wrapping around the string here is called serving. Obviously, different strings have different colors. For the end loops, if you're using what's called a Flemish twist, there are no end loops. So you will have serving here. It's just the raw string that's braided together. Whereas for the endless loop strings, you will have these wrapped loops. They're called serving. That's the end serving. And you have the center serving, which is the same material. Now, the purpose of the serving material is to provide thickness and padding for the knock. Therefore, the knock will not abrade the string itself when put on the string. But the other thing is to prevent abrasion damage. So this area here is closest to the archer's arm and any equipment they're wearing on their arm and wrist. So if you're hitting an arm guard or your bare arm, then this will not wear the string out as much. And this area here is meant to protect against contact with the bow. So this part here often contacts the limb tip. So if you can see on this Turkish bow, you'll see that this is normally where there's some contact here. And this part, the loop itself, is meant to prevent any abrasion from the loop or the notch where the string normally sits. So if this center part, the serving, becomes unraveled, that's okay. The string itself is unlikely to be damaged and you can easily fix this by hand. Same thing with the end serving. If this section is damaged, then this too can be fixed by hand. This doesn't compromise the structure of the string. This part is a lot more worrying. So what happens here, as you can see from this end, is that the serving has been worn through. And the reason why this happens is for some bows, the notch, as you can see there, is fairly sharp. Now a good bow with good quality control and good polish will sand these down, and therefore you will not have much, if any, abrasion to the string loop. But as this one is quite sharp, and you can see the wood softened, so from continuous usage, it's worn through the wood. So even if it is smooth, it's worn it through. This will continually cause damage to the serving and the string itself with repeated usage. And that's what caused this string failure. Now, this is actually the second time I've had this particular string failure. The first time was with my win bow, the Olympic recurve, and it was a similar structural damage to the string loop. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but the serving was getting worn through, so it must have been a braiding against the limb tip that I had. It wasn't sharp, but it was just wear and tear, which over time and with lots of usage will get worse. And a similar thing happened. A lot of people will think that if the string snaps, it's going to blow the bow up and cause massive injury. For compound, yes, it will, but for recurve, surprisingly, despite having broken 2 strings while shooting, they've both failed in the exact same way. And that is the loop snapped upon release, not at full draw, which to some people might seem a little like, well, at full draw, it's under the most strain, the most weight. But it's actually the release, the acceleration of the limb tips, which causes this to fail. So both times I've shot, the arrow has actually flown on target. The Olympic recurve actually scored a gold at 30 meters. It was my best shot of the day, also my last shot of the day. But for both times, the string snapped on release, the arrow flew normally. The bow feels a little lighter. It does sound like a dry fire when you do that. So it does sound kind of scary, but it doesn't dry fire, it does shoot. It's just that the bow becomes unbraced because the string's no longer there. So it sounds kind of scary, but the effect isn't that bad. But do always check if there's any structural damage to your bow. Normal, it's okay. If you're not sure, take it to a pro shop, get it checked out. And while you're at it, get a new string. So that's the 2 most common places of damage, the 2 end loops, because those are the areas which are most prone to wear and tear because of regular usage. If the loops get fuzzy, you probably should, one, check if there's any sharp edges on your limb tips, but also you may as well get a new string. You can fix these, but they're a bit of a pain to do so, and by this point you don't want to replace the string anyway. You can do temporary fixes like putting tape around it. We do it for our light bows at our club sometimes when the string's worn through, because you can't really fix these without redoing the entire string, so you might as well make a new string in that case. But this is where you most commonly see damage, and again, you will often see the center serving unravel from just abrasion or wear and tear or nicking something in your equipment, but that's easily fixed. Now, the more catastrophic failure is if the exposed string itself gets damaged. This doesn't normally happen through regular usage because there's no contact with the string. The arrow doesn't touch it, you don't touch it. And the only times you really see the string getting damaged is if you've left it exposed to something like a sharp edge in your kit, or you put it on the ground and it's rubbing against rocks or concrete. So you'll see some damage there. So do be careful how you treat the string. If you do see any nicks and abrasion, then it is pretty much gone. If you've accidentally cut it with something, then it's a throwaway. You can't really reuse it. It will still shoot, but the structure is much weaker as strands get damaged and cut, and you will experience a very similar failure when you draw it and release it. So, but personally, I've never seen a string cut along this side before. I've never had a string break on this side. And again, I use a lot of bows and strings. I make a lot of strings. I normally make new strings because the older ones have dried out or they've stretched out and I want a new color, but I've never really had to replace the string because of damage. So strings are quite resilient. The only care you really have to take is to wax it every week or so, depending on your usage, to keep it a little moist and remove the abrasion from the individual strands. But the string itself is mostly fine, but the most vulnerable points are these end loops. So do check these and do check your bow. Most of the time there's no problem, but depending on your bow design, the quality control, you may find that it will cut through. So that's my lesson learned the second time. Hope you found it interesting. A bit surprised topic today, but hopefully that is educational. Thank you all for watching, and hopefully we'll see you next time.